everybody. Welcome to Temple of Geeks Who Review, a Doctor Who-inspired podcast for fans of the long-running British science fiction television series. I'm your host, Elizabeth, aka Lady of Time Cosplay. We're massive Doctor Who fans, and we're here to talk about all things Doctor Who. Throughout our series, we'll be discussing the latest episodes, classic series, spin-offs, and everything in between. We'll also be bringing you interviews with people who have worked in and around the series, and behind-the-scenes information, and all sorts of other Doctor Who-related fun. So whether you're a longtime fan or just getting started, we hope you'll join us for the ride. Today, we will be discussing Boom, but first, Monica, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm filling in for Nate. My name is Monica. I'm the editor-in-chief at Temple of Geek, and I'm a producer for Temple Geeks Who Reviews, so I'm excited to kind of lend my voice for an episode.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you on, so I'm very excited. But yes, so just to get it out there, this will have pretty major spoilers for Boom. So if you have not watched Boom, if somehow you have not watched it yet, put a pause on this episode, come back after you've watched it. It's a fantastic episode, but yeah, no, we're going to immediately get into spoilers, so go watch. So to start with, and this has kind of got multiple parts to it, but what were your overall thoughts on the episode? How did it compare to what you thought the episode was going to be? And were you excited to have Stephen Moffat back? Because this is the first episode this series that we've gotten that is not written by Russell T Davies.
Yeah, no, I was excited to get Stephen Moffat back just because I'm a fan of his eras. I think he was a really great showrunner, but I think he's a stronger writer. So I was excited to see him back. And the thing that really stuck out to me first and foremost was that this felt like a leftover Eleven and Clara episode. Just like the first couple minutes, I was like, this is not the same Doctor that we saw in The Church in Ruby Road or in Space Babies or in The Devil's Court. This felt like a very Matt Smith era Doctor. And the dialogue between Ruby and the Doctor in this episode felt like Eleven and Clara to me. Ruby seemed different to me. She felt like Clara. And I was like, did he just have this one in the bank and like repurposed it or something? So that was my initial thought. I really enjoyed the episode, but it did feel very 11-y.
Yeah, it definitely was a very different side to the Doctor than we've seen in his previous 3 or 4 episodes, depending on how you want to count. But I think part of that is just immediate seriousness of the situation as soon as the episode starts. What's funny, though, is when I first read the synopsis for the episode, I thought it was going to be like a Doctor Light episode. But it wound up being more of like a bottle episode where like really like 95% of the episode takes place in that hole that he fell into and stepped on the landmine kind of thing. One thing that I said online, and hopefully it didn't spoil things too much for people, but was that I felt like this was very much kind of Stephen Moffat's take on Midnight a little bit, where it's not about the big chasing the monsters and but it's about like how these characters react in this very contained situation. And as much as I enjoyed the like fantasy aspects of Space Babies and Devil's Court, apparently people online really did not like the musical performance at the end of Devil's Court, but I adored it. But kind of like what Russell T Davies actually said in the press conference that I got to be part of, where he said, this episode is a much more traditional hard sci-fi, and I definitely saw that in this episode.
I was getting a lot of Star Wars vibes at the end of the episode, with them staring off into like the sunset. The clothing that the young girl in the episode, Splice, was wearing.
Splice.
She had this like Rey kind of Star Wars look. And then that hologram at the end where like Dad is just kind of waving. That gave me like the whole Anakin Force Ghost thing. So it did feel very sci-fi, and I liked what you said about it being like midnight. I agree. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really great.
Yeah. I know that they're trying to make the show more accessible to newer viewers, which is great because, it's got this whole new life on Disney Plus. Hopefully a lot more people are going to come to enjoy the show. I want enough people to enjoy the show so that they can have a Doctor Who night at Disneyland like they have Star Wars night. Mostly because I think Space Mountain with Murray Gold's music would be phenomenal. But that aside, I really like that Stephen Moffat put a lot of like little nods to his previous episodes of Doctor Who in this, because this is actually his 49th episode of Doctor Who that he's written, which is crazy to me. He's written the most of the new series for any of the writers, which is amazing. But you've got the Valengard mention, which that first came up in the Doctor Dances when he switched Jack's gun out for a banana, and he talked about how he blew up their factory, or what. It's been a bit since I've watched that episode, but I remembered that being a reference. You've got the church being soldiers, like we saw in Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone, and A Good Man Goes to War, which I thought was fun idea to bring back. You get in that little poem that he recites to calm himself down about the moon and the president's wife, which is kind of a running joke in Clara's last season with 12. And then at the end when he said he likes fish fingers and custard.
Yep. And that's what I'm saying. Yes to all of that. I did love the little callbacks and stuff, but it just felt like 11. Like, even just the way that Ruby and the Doctor played off each other just felt to me like 11 and Clara. And then his little fish fingers and custard, I'll be waiting for that when I come back. It was very playful. One thing that I noticed right away too was that Doctor Who is a family friendly show, right? But they've been like very focused on kids, and the way that I feel like the Doctor is talking to kids all the time directly. I think it's so important to talk to kids at their level. The episode covered a lot of like parallels to what's happening in our world right now, thoughts and prayers, things like that. Lots of call outs to things that are happening now. And I think that this is such a lovely way to tell kids, like, your feelings are valid. Things aren't always great. Keep the faith. But like, don't take advantage of people. Capitalism is bad. War is bad. Like, it really felt like they were talking to this young generation of kids who are like suffering and going through all these things right now. And I thought that was really important. And I think that was really nice. It didn't dumb anything down. It was like, war is horrible. Politics are horrible. Greed is horrible. And it made it accessible to young kids.
Yeah. One of my other favorite TV series ever is MASH, which I know is an old TV series, but I love it. I first saw it, like, it was reruns on Hallmark Channel, and now it's like a show that I have on Hulu all the time. There's a quote, there's an exchange in MASH that I think about a lot. So basically, for anybody who doesn't know, MASH is about these field army doctors during the Korean War. Hawkeye is one of those doctors, and scene where they're in this kind of field army hospital, and Hawkeye says, war isn't hell. War is war and hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse. And then Father Mulcahy, who's the camp's priest, he says, how do you figure that, Hawkeye? And he says, easy, Father. Tell me, who goes to hell? Sinners, I believe. Exactly. There are no innocent bystanders in hell. But war is chock full of them. Little kids, cripples, old ladies. In fact, for a few of the brass, almost everybody involved is an innocent bystander. Which isn't directly related, but it's a quote that I think about a lot. If this is random for a Doctor Who podcast, but if you have not watched MASH, I highly recommend it. Yes, sometimes it is a product of its time, as you can tell by some of the language in that quote, but overall it's very ahead of its time. It feels like a lot. Anyway, I see definitely what you mean, where it is talking to kids, because like you said, it is a family show, which I think we don't have a lot of in the States. It's usually kids shows or preteen show, like, young adult or adult TV series. We don't have a lot of stuff that is written and meant for the entire family. Like, yeah, in some cartoons, there's jokes that the adults will get that that's going to go over the kids' heads. Like watching Animaniacs as an adult, I was like, oh my word, kind of thing, But it is nice to have a show where everybody can sit down and it discusses those themes in a way that is accessible for the entire audience, So
Absolutely. I think one of the reasons Doctor Who is one of my favorite shows is because I started watching it when my son was like 8 or 9. He's 20 now, but we started watching it together as a family. And it was this thing that we all enjoyed, we all loved for whatever our reasons were, right? It was the only thing that we really kind of just watched as a family when he was little. And they grew up with Doctor Who, and it was something that we could share, and Halloween costumes, family themed Doctor Who costumes, and all that kind of stuff. And you're right. There's not a lot of shows in the States that are for everyone. Maybe you can say like some Star Wars or The Mandalorian and things like that, but there's very few and far between, especially in sci-fi.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, just overall, I really, 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 really adored this episode. I think as much as I don't fully agree with some of the criticisms that were lobbied at Space Babies and The Devil's Cord, I get where some people were coming from with what they were saying about those episodes. And I really think that this episode, both in terms of bringing it back to more solid sci-fi roots and showing a more serious side of the Doctor in this episode, are going to help people get a little more used to what this series of Doctor Who, what this era of Doctor Who is going to be like.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think too, just to speak to the criticisms of Doctor Who, so there is a level of sci-fi for everyone, right? So Doctor Who stays a family show, stays a kid show, and even though it has like dark, deep moments, it stays a kid show, basically, right? Whereas if you're consuming a lot of like geek pop culture stuff, you're watching Game of Thrones, you're watching The Last of Us, or you're watching even Star Wars Andor was a little bit like more adult, more for like a grown audience. And so you're expecting Doctor Who to fit into that, which it won't. Doctor Who is quirky, it's silly, it's funny. It doesn't fit into that. So I think that a lot of times people criticize it for not being something else versus comparing Doctor Who to Doctor Who.
Yeah,
You know
that's a
what I
really good
mean?
point. Yep.
And there's a time and a place for it, right? Like my favorite all-time favorite sci-fi series is The Expanse. And I love that show so much because it's super political, it's super relatable. It's Game of Thrones in space. It's like The Boys in space, but not as violent. But it's the most scientifically accurate sci-fi there is out there, and I love it very much. It's very clever, it's very like smart, it's kind of sci-fi, but I don't want to consume that all the time. Sometimes I want there to be a twist at the end and a dance scene and goofiness and everything's happy honky dory. You know what I mean? I think a lot of the criticism is that a lot of the Doctor Who fans are growing up and they want something a little bit more adult, and Doctor Who hasn't grown up with them.
Doctor Who kind of exists on a spectrum where, like, yeah, sometimes you're going to have really silly, kind of fun little episodes. I mean, for crying out loud, the first episode when the show came back in 2005 had somebody getting eaten by a trash bin, you know? And then you do have the more serious episodes, like some of the moments that you get in Turn Left with the references to history, the very tragic history that really happened, and the Doctor dying, and but then season 4 has a lot of really depressing things happen all in a row, kind of thing. Which so it's maybe not my best, but there's a spectrum for Doctor Who, and I think especially when they are trying to reach a new audience, they don't necessarily want to front load with super, super serious episodes. They want to show like, hey, this show is fun and it's exciting and it's got different elements to it. And those 2 episodes were a really great way to introduce some of that stuff. And now they're going to be like, okay, here is an example of how the show can get a bit more serious.
If you want Doctor Who to exist for another 60 years, it has to adapt to the times and it has to adapt to a new generation. It has to be appealing to a new generation, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, like, it's just going to die out when we die out.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
They got to try different things. I mean, the show's existed for 60 years for a reason. It's got a good formula. It's got a good setup. The show can do anything, go anywhere, be anything. But yeah, you still have to take into consideration how to keep those things fresh and how to change those things for the current audience or for the audience that they are looking to reach, which they're trying to make it a worldwide thing. And I hope they succeed because, again, I want to go to Doctor Who night at Disneyland.
I don't know if you know about this, but there used to be an unofficial Doctor Who day at Disneyland. And we had been part of that since I think its first one. Mm-hmm. And it was really fun. You'd have like all these Whovians taking these massive pictures. Like, I would say at least 100 to 150 people in front of Disney's castle. And, because Disney has a no costume policy, but Doctor Who clothes is very like everyday clothes. It's not like a full costume. And so
Right.
you were allowed to go in the park dressed as 10 or 12 or whoever.
I have
And
been
so,
twice as Romana.
yeah, absolutely. So Doctor
Yeah.
Who at Disneyland has happened, but it'd be nice to have an official Doctor Who day
Yes.
at Disneyland.
Exactly. And like I keep saying to people, I'm like, as soon as Disney starts making Doctor Who merch, I will never have money again. So
Yeah.
moving moving on a little though, what were some of your like standout moments or performances in this episode?
I think the fact that Nshudi had to act on one foot for a very long time
Yes.
and not really move. No Sonic to help him. He was just kind of by himself using his brain, using his logic. I like the little line where he's like, I'm trying not to show off right now, with how
Yeah.
smart he is and how much he knows and things like that. I think really throughout the last 4 episodes, his acting has really stood out to me. He's a fantastic actor. He has great range. And just seeing him just kind of do his thing has been really impressive in every episode, especially this one.
Oh, for sure. He's still silly. He still has jokes. One of the notes that I put down is "Shut up" in Google is going to be a Gallifrey 1 ribbon for sure. That might be one of my ribbons, not gonna lie. But it was because his energy is so dynamic. It very much reminds me of both 11 and 10, especially with how much energy he has and how much charisma and just running around having fun kind of thing. So to put him in an episode where by definition he has to stay still, he has to stay somewhat measured in his emotional response to everything going on was a fascinating thing to watch, to see that side, because he obviously can do it, but it was fun to get to see that side of that character, because they put on the episode thought that we were going to watch Ruby die, for crying out loud. I mean, you know.
Yeah, I was surprised when they shot her. I was like,
I know. I
I was
was
like,
like,
oh, obviously they're gonna save her. This is only episode 4, so I
right.
wasn't too stressed. But I was like, what? They like
Exactly. I
shot
was
her.
like, so.
I was not expecting that.
No, not even slightly. I really really enjoyed seeing that side of his performance. And I mean, one thing that it's kind of annoying when you can kind of extrapolate from seeing fandom responses what the fandom kind of picky thing is going to be about this. So it is canon in Doctor Who that Time Lords can control their heart rate and even like stop their hearts for a certain period of time to fake death. I don't know if it was the first instance, but the most kind of famous instance of that is Romana but the first episode with Romana too, Lala Ward. She has a line in there about how she stopped her hearts to escape notice from these people, and they taught her that in school. It's not a big deal, it's just something she can do. I think people might be like, well, why didn't the doctor just stop his hearts and whatever. And I'm like, well, because the whole point, because people do this a lot with Stephen Moffat's episodes, so I'm kind of used to being like, okay, let's think about the evidence that we have and what was actually said in the episode. What he said in the episode is, if it detected any changes, it would go off. So it's not necessarily as simple as the doctor stopping his hearts and, stepping off or whatever. It's like any changes, any fluctuations in what was going to make that countdown tick up. So hopefully that's not a big thing. Hopefully that's just my brain being used to people being way over picky and not always paying attention to Stephen Moffat's episodes, because he does put things in there that should be obvious but aren't. But that was my one little thing. My only like little tiny thing that I kind of wish had been a little tiny bit different is I wish they had cast the kid who played Splice just a little bit younger. Just because for the age that the kid playing her seemed like that should be a kid who understands things a little bit better in terms of like, hey, let me not, like that was a hologram of my dad, not actually my dad. So why am I running towards him? Or
Right, like you would
looking
think
at
she would
pictures
know
in the
that.
middle of everything going on, being like, oh, that's when we saw the animal, kind of thing. I wish she'd just been like a little tiny bit younger, because it just no hate to the actor, to the kid who was playing her, but I feel like if she had been a little bit younger, it would have worked a little bit better. But she still did a phenomenal job doing what she did with that acting. So
No, I
that was
agree
my
with
only
that. I think casting that child a little younger would have been perfect. Yeah, I
yeah
agree.
yeah. So,
One thing that I did the only thing that I was like, oh, this is kind of unnecessary was the relationship between Monday and the other gentleman. I forget his
mhm,
name. The other soldier that
yeah,
is in love with her.
yeah,
I didn't see the point in him being there.
yeah,
Like, not so much the point of him being there, but them talking up their relationship so much and giving them this backstory because, like, he dies, yes, she's sad, but I think she would have been sad if it had been any of her comrades that were, like, there, you know? So
sure.
I think that they gave him, like, this bigger backstory than there needed to be. It just seemed like more unnecessary stuff going on.
Yeah.
I,
Well, we'll get into this in the next question a little bit, but I think also part of his function was to exist so that they had somebody to show in the trailers that wasn't the big surprise.
What was the big surprise?
Oh, the new companion showed up, which I'm gonna be. Let me ask the question, then we'll talk about that. Yeah, that was Varda Santhu. Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So I'm gonna be completely honest. I didn't realize that that was her until I read the do not reveal list, and then I was like, wait a second, what? Yeah, Monday is Mundy Flynn. Yeah, so, let me do the question. We got the surprise introduction of Varda Santhu as Mundy Flynn in this episode, an actress we didn't think we'd be seeing as part of the show until next season.
So then you have Sunday and Monday?
Yes. So any thoughts on where this is going, especially with how well they hid her? Because even if you look on IMDb right now, she is not on the cast list. Versus the like Susan Twist, who like it's been a big thing where people have been looking at what she's in. She is not on the IMDb cast list at all. So there's no references to her, even in the. I don't know if it's bad to get into the nitty gritty, but like when you get for anybody who isn't familiar with this, when you get screeners, a lot of times they will give you a list of things that they don't want you to talk about. And if you talk about, you could probably get in trouble and they won't give you screeners anymore. And one of the things was do not discuss the appearance of Varda Sathu as Mundy Flynn in this episode. Do not even hint that there is something exciting happening or that there's something being hidden from the general audience with this character.
I'm going to take it with a grain of salt because Martha Jones was in an episode when she was leading up to be a companion. She was, the cousin of Martha Jones who was in Torchwood. It was Unit, maybe, or Torchwood.
Yeah.
So also Amy Pond was in an episode. She was one of the like Pompeii witches in one of the previous episodes before she jumped on board. So I'm going to take it with a grain of salt as like maybe it's just kind of popping her in like they've done before because they did it in RTD's era. So maybe it's the actual companion or maybe it's just her face showing up.
Yeah, I put in my notes, if I had a nickel for every time Stephen Moffat introduced a new companion on the show before anyone thought they were actually going to show up, I'd have 2 nickels between her and Clara.
Yeah,
So
that's a great point.
yeah, so if they weren't being so secretive about this, I'd be like, oh, maybe it's just they happened to cast her and they liked her and so they're going to bring her back. But she is in none of the trailers. She is not on IMDb or listed in the cast anywhere. They were very clear. Do not even hint that this is a thing. That there's something more to this episode than what is being advertised, kind of thing. I'd be like, oh, maybe it's just. But I'm like, something's up. Something's up
I
here. I don't know what though.
So I'm trying to think because like also Donna was one of the companions introduced early on that
Mm-hmm.
didn't come back till like the next season or whatever, right?
Yeah.
She was just kind of like in the Runaway Bride and then we don't see her for a hot minute or whatever. He goes off and does his thing. And then also Clara comes in the Dalek episode or whatever.
Oswin. Yep.
She's like a bunch of different people.
Yep.
So Doctor Who, you just never know. We can speculate, we can predict, but you just don't know with Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Like it
I
can
know.
be so many things because they've introduced companions so early on before that it could be anything.
Yeah, if that is the character that is going to become a companion eventually, I will be very interested to see how that happens. I mean, the doctor did reference like, oh, I'll pop in every now and then, and I like fish fingers and custard, so whatever. So I'm interested to see how this gets set up if this is the same character that we will be seeing in the next series of Doctor Who. But I'm kind of hoping she is because if Mundy Flynn is the new companion that we'll be seeing, because in the press release, they do not reference the character's name. They just say this actress is going to be joining the show as a companion in season 2. She would be like the first non-contemporary Earth companion in a hot minute. I went and did my research. There were a lot like Nardole, technically. Who knows what Nardole is? Nobody knows what Nardole is except Nardole, but he's
Captain
not in the show
Jack.
as consistently as a companion would be River, but also, she's not consistent in the show. She's not every episode. Captain Jack is from the future, but also like for the episodes where he was a companion, he always felt, he wasn't in it a ton as a traditional like companion from episode to episode. So like the last kind of full-time companions that are there for an entire series that there were, I had to go all the way back to like the Fifth Doctor's era to get Chameleon, who is a robot, who I haven't seen any of his episodes, and then Turlo, Nissa, and Adric are all not from Earth and from different time periods. So I don't know. I think it would be a very interesting type of character to put the Doctor up against, especially with the conversations that they have about faith and about soldiers and It kind of feels like that gives room to explore more of what the Doctor's relationship with Danny Pink was kind of like. But Danny, of course, was like, heck no, leave me alone. I don't ever want to travel in this TARDIS kind of thing. So I'm really, really interested to see where this goes.
I didn't realize it. Maybe because I wasn't looking for it either, and I had heard the news of the new companion so long ago that
Right.
it just didn't occur to me. But they do mention her name a lot in the episode. They like purposely say Monday, Monday, Monday over and
Mm-hmm.
over again.
Yeah, the Doctor
So
has a joke about if they got married, she'd be Monday, Sunday.
yeah, they said her name so many times, possibly we could get her back. And he said he'd be back for fish fingers and custard. And he even mentioned maybe she'll be a president one day about the daughter. So, like, what if
Yeah.
it's like the future where he runs into them or something like that? It'll
Yeah.
be interesting. Clara, I guess, she was also not an Earth companion when she was in Asylum of the Daleks.
Right.
So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Apart from like, characters who were only like not traditional full-time companions who were with the Doctor for every single episode, or like with Captain Jack, he was only the like for a couple of episodes
yeah,
was
just a
he like
couple.
a companion. So I know a lot of people online have been talking about like, oh my god, when are we going to get a non contemporary Earth companion? So it'll be very interesting to see
When the
where they
photos
go with
were
this.
revealed of Bill Potts and the outfit she wore, there's a lot of
Yeah, oh yeah.
speculation that she was like from the 80s, maybe even early 90s. And I really loved that idea of the Doctor picking up a companion from like a different era, you know?
Yeah.
I think that that would be like a fun little twist, a fun little thing to do. I think I would like that, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And I do remember, now that we're talking about it, I do remember that at one point the like version of Clara that we were going to get for all of Clara's run at one point was going to be the Victorian Clara that we meet in the Snowmen. I remember, I don't know if it was his Tumblr or somewhere else, but I know that Neil Gaiman talked about how the first draft that he did of Nightmare in Silver was with Victorian Clara and the Victorian kids that she was looking after. So it was like a thought at one point with Clara, apparently, to have her be from the past, which I think would also be an interesting companion.
I
But
I
yeah,
wish they would have gone that route.
yeah. So I'm very interested to see where this goes. I'm very interested to see everybody's reactions. I'll be interested to see if I have a feeling I won't be the only one who like did not clock that. But because compared to when Jenna Coleman popped up in Asylum of the Daleks, like they had just finished like wall to wall coverage of her casting because the Pawns, Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill had been the companions for 2.5 series. And so they cast Jenna, and all of a sudden it's this big thing. And so I've seen her face everywhere. And, versus with Varda, first they didn't even acknowledge it, even though there had been, people on set seeing her filming with Nishudi Gatwa. But they only recently acknowledged that, yes, oh yes, this lady is going to be playing the new companion in series 2 of Doctor Who.
So what's interesting about that too is that it is possible that the reason that they didn't promote it is because they're still working on promoting Nshudi
mhm,
and Millie Gibson as the new pair. So to add in like another companion, as you said, the Pawns, when they announced Clara, we had the Pawns for so long, we had already known them, and they were going to keep their existing doctor. Clara was going to inherit 11, right? So this is all new, and to just kind of like put a new companion out there already so
Yep.
early on when we haven't even seen Millie Gibson and Ncuti on screen, I understand why they probably didn't talk about it that much.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, who knows if this is the character that will be the companion, or if they just happen to work with this actress. They're like, yeah, we'll get her in to play the companion. But I'll be interested to see how they work that out if Mundy is a new companion next season, because it
So
felt like a very one-off episode to be like, oh yeah, we're going to come back to this character, because it felt like everything tied up pretty nicely.
it could be something like very River Song.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Moffat is the only one who's ever written River Song, so maybe she is a Stephen Moffat character, and she'll be like a River Song or a Captain Jack that travels with them every once in a while, but not all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? When I was doing the Doctor Who news roundup for this week, I did Stephen Moffat. He's going to be doing the Christmas special this year too, which will be his 50th episode of Doctor Who. And he did talk about, it was very interesting to me because he talked about how he's read, including his own script, he's read the first 5 episodes of this series, but he has not read the last 3. But he's writing the Christmas special this year, but he has read the series finale for next season, even though he apparently doesn't have involvement in series 2. So I'm not sure what's going on
So
there.
there's some kind of tie that he needed to know that this has to end up
Yeah,
here, right?
right.
Like they said, okay, here's the end game. Whatever you set up here has to end up here.
Yeah.
And he
It was
doesn't know
interesting.
anything
Like,
in
he doesn't
between.
have the
Yeah.
knowledge of what comes immediately before the episode, which I thought is going to be interesting. So we'll see. But a lot of times the Christmas specials are kind of standalones anyway, apart from
Yeah.
when it's like a
Mhm.
regeneration special kind of thing.
And on this Christmas special, we'll get Bridgerton star Nicola Coughlan.
Mm-hmm.
Big deal.
Yep. And also, they did reveal the episode title for that is going to be Joy to the World. So we'll see. There's a lot coming up. It's nice knowing that they have all of this filmed in advance, so we don't have to worry about like when a new series will finally be filmed and how long it'll take to then get to TV screens, but also like knowing stuff so far in advance. I'm like, I just want to focus on what's going on right now. But, it's also exciting because it's going to be interesting because it will be the first Christmas special not written by the showrunner since the show came back. So I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see.
Well,
But speaking of these through lines, another thing that I did not notice until Twitter very helpfully pointed it out is actress Susan Twist appearing in pretty much every single episode, including one of the 60th anniversary specials. She was in Wild Blue Yonder. She was like the maid for Sir Isaac Newton. She was in Church on Ruby Road. She was somebody in the bar, if I'm looking at these screen caps correctly. Space Baby, she was one of the people on the screen saying like, oh, I disagree with abandoning this station. In Devil's Cord, she was the tea lady, and now this episode, Boom, is like the most she's on screen, because she's the face of the ambulance. Any thoughts on who she might be or where we're going with this?
so when they started kind of dropping her everywhere, at least when the Church on Ruby Road came out, people were speculating that she was like the master or something, or I wonder if this is like a bad wolf situation, right? Or like how Clara had been confettied into like the universe when she
Yeah.
jumped into the time stream or something. Is this a type of like confetti situation? Not that she's Clara, but like, did she jump into a time stream and she's
Yeah.
everywhere with the
Yeah.
Doctor in the same sense? That was my first thought. Or is it like a bad wolf thing where like, Rose sent herself messages across time and things like that. So those are the first 2 things that like popped into my head. The other thing was like, is she a Time Lord? Is she the lady that drops off Ruby? Like, because I mean, we don't know who this mysterious person is, but this image has been, with the snow and everything, has been consistent. I would think it would be weird if she wasn't tied into that somehow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I very honestly have no clue. I know there's so many theories. There's some people theorizing that Ruby's mom is River, and I'm like, I don't think so. Or that there's a character who was seen a lot in the Sarah Jane Adventures called the Trickster. Like maybe the Trickster is involved in this somehow, but then, you got the snow. Even in this episode, the ambulance, even though the ambulance knows that Ruby's like, over 3,000 years old or whatever, technically, if time streams had been progressed forward and she hadn't hopped in a time machine kind of thing, it glitched out when it was trying to figure out who her next of kin was. So there's not a record that even the ambulance can figure out, even with it being an algorithm, AI, whatever kind of thing,
And also,
There's
there's
just
the
so
whole, the
many.
doctor doesn't know what Ruby is. She's
Mm-hmm.
something. She's manipulating snow around her.
Yeah.
They talk about the toy maker's children. Is there
Mm-hmm.
more? Is this like Susan Twist, a toy maker child, right?
Yeah.
Is she going to be the big baddie at the end? She's been there the whole time, kind of thing.
I said in the last episode, like, I really feel like Ruby is going to wind up being a child or grandchild of the toy maker, especially. This is getting ahead a little bit, but like, for the episode Rogue, we know now that Jonathan Groff's character is called Rogue, and that there's another character called the Duchess. So I feel like there might be some parallel, because with how we've seen the Toymaker's children named so far, granted we've got one, and that's Maestro, but the kids don't have the in front of their name. It's like just a name. And so we've got Rogue, that could be a Toymaker's child's name. And we've got the Duchess, which is even directly called into in Space Babies, where the doctor's talking about, the doctor or the Rani or the conquistador. And so I'm wondering if that's going to be like a parallel where it's like, oh, here's a Time Lord and a child of the Toymaker, just
Like
like the Doctor and
Razalon
Ruby.
wasn't
But
like the Razalon.
bad.
I have had a lot of hopes for a long time that we would get more Time Lords, and I
Mm-hmm.
was so excited about the 50th anniversary episode because we got introduced to all these Time Lords. I was really excited in the Fugitive Doctor episode where you see this like, Gallifreyan police force coming together. And in the Flux event where they had like the Time Lord police and the angels were working for the Time Lords. That stuff was very exciting to me because it gave me hopes of like a Star Wars spin-off type thing that didn't have the main Jedis, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping for some more Gallifreyans. I was like crushed when like the Master destroyed Gallifrey and turned them into Cybermen or whatever he did to them. I
Yeah.
was gutted. I was crushed. I want Gallifreyans. Like give them to me. Where are they? So I'm
Yes.
really hoping that the Duchess and Rogue and whoever they are some kind of Gallifreyan. Fine if they're the toy maker kids. That's fine. I get it. It's a storyline. But it'd be
Yeah.
nice if they were Gallifreyan.
I mean, my biggest thing is I'm like, can we, for crying out loud, get Romana back on the show already? Like, I really thought that Ruth was going to be Romana because of the R necklace that she has, but, no, her name's Ruth. But I would really like Romana back in the show. Lala Ward is still here. She's, I mean, she mostly does the audios these days, but I would love to have Romana back. I'm like, can we just make Gallifrey a live action series, or at least like bring some of the characters in? I'm like, I want Brax to be in the TV series so everybody can freak out about the Doctor having a brother. Thank you. Or Narvin, because he's grumpy but he's adorable and I love him.
Wait for all of that.
Yes. So yeah, but going back to Susan Twist, I genuinely have not a single clue what her character, if all those characters are connected or what's going on. Again, kind of going back to what I was saying about the casting thing earlier, there's already news articles about how she is in the cast list for the next series, but still nothing about the actress who's playing the new companion in this series, in this appearing in this episode. So I don't know if like she's a red herring, not meant to throw people off of like other bigger things that they have planned, but I'm interested to see what happens. I just don't have like huge theories on who she is. I mean, at one point, the thought entered my brain like kind of like in The End of Time, the woman that pops up and talks to Wilfred a couple times has long been. I mean, Russell did kind of confirm it, where he said his intention was for that character to be the Doctor's mother. I mean, one of the Doctor's mothers at this point is a jerk. So this might be like the mother figure who was kind to him that we kind of see in Day of the Doctor, who was kind to him in the barn kind of thing. Not Day of the Doctor. Listen, when we get
Right.
that flashback with the kid doctor and we hear somebody being nice to the doctor who could be kind of a mother figure. I don't know. That was like one of my thoughts, but also, with all the fourth wall breaks, maybe this is she's like an outside, like an observer to the story. Like somebody was like, I saw, I don't know if it was necessarily directly about this, but I think somewhere on Twitter I saw somebody like, oh, kind of how like maybe Maestro is music, maybe whoever Susan Twist is playing is like stories or something like that. And I thought that was an interesting theory as well, but I don't know. But I'm interested to find out because
I'm
there's
excited.
way to go.
It's been a great season. I'm really like a big fan of the visuals this season. I think it's
Mm.
been beautiful. Mike Chen, the author who wrote Brotherhood, Star Wars Brotherhood, he pointed out that the Space Babies mouths were like really off. And I agree with him, with the exception of the Space Babies mouths movie when they were talking. Everything else has been perfect. It's been a very beautiful season. The visuals are incredible. The wardrobe that Ncuti and Millie Gibson have been in, gorgeous, just gorgeous. So, you know,
I will say
I've
that
been enjoying it.
at least there was effort with making the Space Babies talk versus like something like Madam Web where they didn't even like try to go in with CGI to match anybody's lips to what was actually being said in the final cut. But what are you gonna do? But yeah, there's a lot of different through lines this season between Susan Twist, Snow, Ruby's mom. There's a lot going on. And I feel like Russell is really making the most of his 8 episodes. Again, I get why, with fewer episodes, but I wish they'd find a way to do more.
It's just fun to have
Yeah,
more.
it is, especially because I'm sure one of the other things that's going to come up and already has because some of the early reviews talked about how Ruby has such a reaction to seeing a different sky and planets in the sky and different stars and how it's called out like, oh, this is her first time on an alien planet. So I get kind of some of the like, okay, but she's been traveling with him for a while, why is this her first alien planet kind of thing. I've
Has
seen
she been? How long have they been traveling together? Because their intimacy level is very high. So for us, it feels like just they've been on Earth. This was her first alien planet. But like, did anything happen in between? Because they feel a lot closer than the Doctor and some of his companions in the past. For example, Martha Joan was always like kind of like pining, trying to get things out of him. Rose was kind of like the same way. Donna makes a comment about David Tennant, how he talks and talks, but never says anything that matters. But the Doctor tells Ruby everything. I have 2 hearts, the Time Lord's this, the Gallifrey's gone. He like spills it for her. Like there seems to be nothing that he's not sharing with her. He's being totally honest, totally open with her. And he even tells her like, "Hey, I'm not going to take you back to the place where you want to go, so don't ask." Like he's so upfront with her. So is that why they're so close and intimate?
I don't know. In Devil's Court, the Doctor asks Ruby like, oh, what time is it for you back home? And she says like, oh, June 2024 or something to that effect. And so because we know for a fact that she started traveling with him on her birthday, which is Christmas or Christmas Eve, whichever.
Yeah, she
That's
does
why
say
people are,
June or July. It's hard to keep
yeah,
track. You're right.
yeah. So there is like that confusion where like, okay, whoa, how long of a gap was there between Space Babies and the Beatles, and did they spend all that time just going through Earth's history kind of thing? I've seen some people, theorize maybe Devil's Court was supposed to come a bit later in the series, possibly, but also like there's a lot of talk in Devil's Court about like new things that are happening. So I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but it is interesting that this is her first like proper alien world for how long it's kind of been hinted at that they've been traveling together. So
Right,
I don't
because
know.
we're thinking at least 6 months at this point,
Yeah,
right? That they've been
yeah,
traveling together.
yeah. Especially
So
because like other companions have talked about how it's hard to keep track. Like there's a line in The Power of Three where Amy's talking about how long they think it's been for them with the Doctor, but they don't know, and oh, their friends are starting to notice that they aged quicker than the rest of them, kind of thing. So I don't know. I think there's some gaps to be filled in, but that's what the comics, that's what Big Finish, that's what the books are for. So hopefully we'll
yeah,
get lots. I did see there's I think 3 novels coming out for the Doctor and Ruby. I haven't looked at the summaries for that, but I do know that when I was looking up stuff about the comic series, It is specifically they're going to all that's left on Earth, like and like the final days of planet Earth. So like that is also still consistently with them time traveling just on Earth. So I mean, I guess there's a lot that you can do with time travel just on Earth, but you know, it'll be interesting to see how more of the story gets fleshed out because they're always pretty good about making sure that stuff's addressed. But we'll see.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see. Was there anything
We'll
else you
see.
wanted to talk about with this episode? Because that's all the questions I had for the moment.
No, the only thing really that just, I enjoyed the bottle episode. I enjoyed seeing the doctor just kind of figure things out with his mind. I love the call outs to thoughts and prayers and things like that. And I just love how relevant Doctor Who always is and how on top of everything. And I just love how relatable Doctor Who is
Yeah,
in a fun, kind of accessible way.
yeah, especially because sometimes it's a little scary how close some of these discussions the show has that are relate to what's going on now, especially because this was filmed like over a year ago. I think they've had this filmed for ages, but because of when the 60th was, they couldn't just put it out, kind of thing. And they're really good at what's going on between the discussion of war and even the AI thing, because that's been like a weird, like, like I think Amazon has something where like you can upload recordings of your loved ones' voices and then you can talk to them even after they're dead, which I'm like, that's a little creepy. Not gonna lie, but
Well, what's interesting is a couple years ago, I got the chance to speak to the writers and the showrunners of the show The Expanse. And it was Daniel Abrams, Ty Frank, and Nareen Shankar. And I asked them, like, how is it that the show is so relevant? How do you know? You wrote this like so many years ago, yet it's so relevant today. And they pointed out to me that, like, really, if you look back anywhere from 500 years ago to 2,000 years ago, all of humans' problems come down to like five things: access to food, access to water, access to land, power, love. Like, everything is kind of the same and it all goes in cycles. And if you just look back at stories from like 150 years ago, you could find the same issues today, So not it's kind of pessimistic, like, wow, things are not really changing, but human problems are they're very much on a cycle.
yeah. And it's writers' jobs to kind of look at what's going on around them, even if they aren't doing it consciously necessary. You're always going to be aware of what's going on in the world, and that's what art does. It gives audiences a way to kind of like be able to look at problems from a different lens, and it's a way for writers to work out what they're feeling about something and to express that sort of thing. I will say one other thing I did think about with this episode, and I put it in my notes too, or wrote it down when I was watching it or thought about it, and I was just like, for as big a budget as the show has now, it's great that they're still making space for episodes where it is 90% takes place in a literal hole in the ground. Like they've got a big budget. I mean, they got budget enough for the Doctor to have a new, outfit every episode and big musical production numbers. And, I mean, who knows what the budget actually looks like, but it is, still nice to have these, even though the stakes were so high for this episode, it was nice to have like that smaller scale where this is a very localized, specific thing that's happening.
Right.
And I thought too it was interesting how Moffat kind of subverted his own kind of take on what a Doctor Who villain is, because I 100% believed, like, yeah, it's a Stephen Moffat episode. I 100% believe that the bad guys are in the fog or in the mud. That tracks for what he does. But then it was the algorithm that is specifically fine tuned to keep these armies dying in just right numbers where they're going to keep buying these products. Ruby asks, why does the landmine have lights on it? And the Doctor says capitalism. And she just laughs like, what? It's like, because flashy lights sell. And it's like, yeah. So it was a phenomenal episode. I really can't wait to see what more people online are saying about it, because it was very, very good, And I love the Doctor's speech at the end too about how we're all dead eventually, but what survives of us is love. But yeah, it was a really good episode, and I loved it. To wrap up, let's see if the TARDIS wiki gives me anything fun. So we do our random fun fact. I don't know if anybody actually enjoys the random TARDIS wiki facts, but I do. Okay, well this has popped up. Child of a TARDIS. The child of a TARDIS, or a child of the time vortex, was an individual with the mark of the time vortex in their DNA, described by River Song as time being in my blood, time is my blood. All right. Well, it was great having you on, Monica. You want to tell everybody where they can find you?
They can find me at Temple of Geek.
Yep.
I write for Temple of Geek. I also write for that hashtag show, and I am on social media as This Dorky Nerd across all platforms.
All right. All right, everybody. So that's all for this episode of Temple of Geeks Who Review. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. You can also follow us on social media for more Doctor Who content. On Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram as @Temple of Geek. You can also visit templeofgeek.com for Doctor Who cosplay guides, episode reviews, news, and more. Thanks so much for listening, everybody.